Hello there. Good afternoon from Jakarta, Indonesia. We come to you live from TVRI World now to bring you the latest on the upcoming 43rd ASEAN Summit and its related summits taking place here in the capital. I'm Rahmat Idris.
And I'm Siska Becker. It is very exciting indeed, Rahmat. ASEAN Week has properly begun now in TVRI World as we are prepping for the opening ceremony that will take place tomorrow right here in our capital, Jakarta.
Yeah, and that will be the pinnacle of the entire year of chairmanship under Indonesia's leadership for the whole year for the ASEAN this year. And we are looking forward to what our leaders tomorrow will come up with in terms of finding common ground and cooperations and basically strengthening relations across ASEAN and beyond.
So a lot of ground to cover today. Let's begin with the journal. And for the 43rd ASEAN Summit is underway, our President Joko Widodo is scheduled to chair 13 bilateral meetings and 12 high-level meetings of the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta that will take place from the 5th to the 7th of September 2023. The President confirms that Indonesia will bring many issues on economic growth in every discussion at the ASEAN Summit.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Retno Marsudi told the media when accompanying President Jokowi to check the venue of the 43rd ASEAN Summit at the Jakarta Convention Center in central Jakarta on Friday that in addition to bilateral meetings with partner countries, the President is scheduled to lead 12 summits, namely the plenary sessions, informal meetings, ASEAN-China Summit, ASEAN-South Korea Summit, and ASEAN-Japan Summit. In addition, he will also chair ASEAN-US Summit, ASEAN-Canada Summit, ASEAN-India Summit, ASEAN-Australia Summit, ASEAN-United Nations Summit, ASEAN+3 Summit, and the East Asia Summit. Meanwhile, President Jokowi said that the 43rd ASEAN Summit will focus on economic issues with ASEAN as the center of economic growth. The President says this summit meeting must touch the ASEAN community. Therefore, there will be a number of meetings on economic operations which are expected to produce economic stability across the ASEAN region.
In the meantime, Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of Indonesia said Indonesia is currently developing an electric vehicle ecosystem to support energy security in the ASEAN region. In the meantime, Indonesia prepared a number of electric vehicles for the delegates to the 43rd ASEAN Summit here in Jakarta.
Minister Erlangga said electric vehicle plays major role in environmental sustainability, starting from reducing greenhouse gas emissions to increasing energy security in the ASEAN region. Speaking in a forum on ASEAN climate held on Saturday, Minister Erlangga said cooperations on EV development includes improving infrastructure and charging facilities, creating good business and investment climate to attract investment, as well as promoting the use of renewable energy in ASEAN countries. Minister Erlangga explained Indonesia itself also has an important role in developing the EV industry ecosystem from upstream to downstream, with a production target of 600,000 units of electric cars and 2.45 million electric motorbikes per year by 2030. In a related development, Head of Traffic Corps Inspector General Firman Sathiabudi said on Saturday police prepared 66 electric cars for ASEAN Summit delegates. He added that electric vehicles includes motorbikes and cars. For ASEAN Summit, high-ranking officials, the use of electric vehicles is in line with Indonesia's efforts towards use of renewable energy, which is environmentally friendly as Indonesia aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2060. Firman said electric vehicles have also been used in the previous ASEAN Summit in Labuan Bajo.
Well, we are less than 24 hours away from the opening ceremony of the 43rd ASEAN Summit and its associated summits here in the capital, Jakarta, Siska. And this morning, the meeting that preceded it all is the Foreign Affairs Ministry meeting led by Minister Retno Marsudi to sort of fine-tune the agenda for tomorrow's summit.
Okay, and that would be the follow-up from their previous gathering at the
AMMPMC
Yes, exactly.
in July.
Okay, so now we have Shafira Junior, our reporter, standing by at the ASEAN Secretariat to tell us more about the agenda for today's proceedings. Let's find out what's happening there at the ASEAN Secretariat from Shafira. Hi, Shafira.
Hello, Siska and Rahmat, reporting live from the venue of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Meeting 2023 at ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. And earlier today, the AMM, or the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Meeting, was opened by Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi with some highlights related to the ASEAN effort that has been done over the past 9 months to make progress in ASEAN community building effort, and also ASEAN has also prepared a strong foundation towards ASEAN Community Vision 2045 in ASEAN Conquered Forth. And also what has been delivered today also to strengthen ASEAN's effort to continue taking a lead in shaping regional dynamics and ensuring a peaceful and inclusive Indo-Pacific region, Rahmat and Siska. And also today there are some issues that were discussed. This is also the continuation of the previous AMM that was held in July before, and also the topics and also the issues regarding the prolonged unsolved conflict in Myanmar is still becoming the highlight in the ASEAN. And also the ASEAN leaders here, the foreign ministers here, trying to create a strategies to solve the problems, not only the challenges related to Myanmar, but also all the challenges that is currently faced by ASEAN, one of which is the transnational organized crimes that is currently happening, and also the how ASEAN will develop the community building, and also how ASEAN will implement the mechanism to make ASEAN a better and inclusive region. And also, Rahmat and Siska, before it is mentioned that ASEAN will work together and strengthen its collaboration between countries, between the member states. And also, although today ASEAN are attended by all the foreign ministers of ASEAN member states, except Myanmar, but all the leaders here, the foreign ministers here, they're discussing how the 5-point consensus can be implemented and can be a reliable solution to solve the conflict that is happening in Myanmar. And that's what we have for today, Rahmat and Siska, from the ASEAN Secretariat Jakarta, the venue of the AMM. I'm Shafira Junior and camera person Danu Dirja reporting for TVI World. Back to you there, Rahmat and Siska.
All right, Shafira and Danu, thank you very much, guys, for the report there from the ASEAN Secretariat, where the meeting for foreign ministers of ASEAN took place this morning. And thank you again.
All right, we'll continue now with the next report, still with ASEAN-related matters, of course. The Minister of Health highlighted the importance of investments in public health sector for ASEAN member states in order to escape from middle-income country trap.
The importance of this summit. It is a signal to the world.
White House National Security Advisor speaking at the second day of ASEAN Investment Forum in Jakarta, Minister of Health Budi Gunadisadikin said investing in public health sector could improve one country's economic size. Budi Gunadi said that many countries in ASEAN are considered developing nations, and ASEAN is classified as a middle-income country. Each ASEAN country aspires to become a high-income nation. The opportunity to achieve the target of a developed nation is open through the demographic bonus that will occur in Indonesia in 7 to 12 years, especially in between 2030 and 2035. This will become a decisive moment for Indonesia to actualize the Golden Indonesia Vision 2045. Therefore, Minister Budi Gunadi has invited investors to invest in public health sector, which will lead to the opening of better investment opportunities and contribute to the ASEAN economy.
Moving on to the next report now, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, Retno Marsudi, said delegations from 22 countries will attend the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta from September 5th to the 7th, 2023.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Retno Marsudi said on Friday delegations from 22 countries and several international organizations will attend the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta. The 11 members of ASEAN, including Timor-Leste, and 9 ASEAN's dialogue partners, namely South Korea, Japan, India, China, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Russia, and the United States will attend the summit. Apart from this, 2 invited countries, namely Bangladesh as the chair of the Indian Ocean Rim Association or IORA and Cook Islands as the chair of Pacific Island Forum or PIF, will attend the summit. Various other international organizations that are partners of ASEAN, namely the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund or IMF, World Economic Forum, as well as ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office or AMRO and Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat or TCS will attend the summit, which holds the theme ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth.
In relation to the arrival of the delegates for the ASEAN Summit, State Airport Operator PT Angkasa Pura II said all 22 presidential aircraft of the heads of states attending the ASEAN Summit will remain overnight at Soekarno-Hatta International Airport in Banten on Sunday, September 3rd, 2023.
President Director of Angkasa Pura Muhammad Awaluddin said on Sunday 15 aircraft are of wide-body type and 7 are of narrow-body aircraft. Awaluddin also said that the aircraft operator has prepared the apron for the aircraft of the head of states and make sure it will not disrupt the activities of commercial air flights at the airport. The management of Angkasa Pura II has ensured the air side and the land side of the airport have been fully prepared to welcome the arrival of the heads of states attending the ASEAN Summit. On top of this, Angkasa Pura II will also operate a command center called the Airport Operation Control Center. The heads of states and delegation will arrive at VIP Gate at Terminal 3, Soekarno-Hatta Terminal 3, and one lounge at Terminal 1 of Soekarno-Hatta International Airport.
Telecommunication operator PT Telkom Indonesia has prepared 100 gigabytes of infrastructure networks at the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta.
Director of Network and IT Solution of Telkom Group, Herlan Wijanarko, said the ASEAN Summit is so important that Telkom has to provide the best information communication and technology or ICT system during the summit. In short, Telkom Group has prepared telecommunication infrastructure with a bandwidth capacity of 27.7 Gbps and a backup system. On top of this, there are 196 access points, 7 satellite news gatherings or SNG. Besides that, the ASEAN Summit is equipped with infrastructure networks of 100 Gbps. Apart from this, 242 officials will be employed at the venue and around the venue to make sure only the best service for the ASEAN Summit. Telkom also provides best infrastructure networks at vital areas like airports, hotels, and media center. A command center is also provided for the security officers consisting of police officers and military officers at the venue of the ASEAN Summit.
Now to one of the most talked about news coming out of the upcoming ASEAN Summit, where U.S. President Joe Biden is confirmed to be absent from the 43rd Leaders Summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, that will be held in Jakarta on September 5th to 7th, 2023.
Of this summit. It is a signal to the world.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on Tuesday Vice President Kamala Harris will represent the U.S. at the ASEAN Leaders Summit meeting. Biden's absence is because he chooses to go to India to attend the G20 summit on September the 7th to the 10th. When asked about the mounting criticism that Biden's absence from the ASEAN summit would generate questions about U.S.'s commitment to the region due to expanding China's influence, Sullivan replied that U.S.'s involvement with Asia-Pacific had been announced since 2021. Sullivan referred to a series of meetings hosted or attended by President Biden, including a trilateral meeting with leaders of South Korea and Japan at Camp David, Maryland, the U.S., last weekend.
And prices, of course, come down. Southeast Asia is the fourth largest market for American goods, and our economic relationships.
And on that note, U.S. President Joe Biden is confirmed to be absent from the 43rd ASEAN Summit and will be represented by Vice President Kamala Harris. His absence will likely have an influence on the deliberations of issues which are of interest to the United States, such as the South China Sea and the Myanmar crisis. And to know more about the impacts of Biden's absence in the summit, we're now joined by Susi Sudarman, Chair of the Center for American Studies at the University of Indonesia.
Hello, good afternoon, Ibu Susi. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening from the U.S.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk with us. We truly appreciate it. Ibu Susi, if you don't mind, I would like to dive right into our first question. But before we talk in details about the impacts of the absence of President Joe Biden in ASEAN Summit, maybe we can first talk about the fundamentals. We would love to learn more, actually, first about U.S.-ASEAN relationship, which seems to have like an on and off switch. Depends on the administration. Could you maybe elaborate on that? Is there a difference between how U.S. sees ASEAN as a partner between Democratic administration and Republican administrations? Because that's how it seems, looking at how Donald Trump, for instance, rarely comes to ASEAN at all, and now Joe Biden seems to be making amends, but still with this really recent developments in his relation with ASEAN, we need to discuss that more. But Ibu Susi, please tell us a little bit more about the general assessment of U.S.-ASEAN relations.
Okay, I'm quoting from a book by Scott Marciel that discusses these things. And he said, the U.S. really doesn't understand Southeast Asia. And it struggles to engage consistently and effectively. During 1990 to 1991, the U.S. lost strategic prism, but the rise of China injected strategic elements in U.S. Southeast Asia region. The rise of China created a tendency to view Southeast Asia through U.S.-China relations. Then he said further that there are three paradigms that need to evolve. One needs a lot of attention to Southeast Asia. Number two, Southeast Asia needs more engagement. And in the U.S.-China rivalry, must not put Southeast Asia in between. So this is the consequences of not understanding Southeast Asia, and there should be a push more for understanding between the two countries, and it seems like it's faltering. And it has been apparent diplomatic downgrade, if I if I have to have an opinion on this.
Right. Ibu Susi, it has been confirmed by the White House that Joe Biden is going to be represented by the Vice President Kamala Harris here in Jakarta for the ASEAN Summit. How do you think the absence of the very leaders of, the economic powerhouse, such as the United States, will influence the way we navigate discussions pertaining things that are truly crucial on the tables of ASEAN, South China Sea, and also the Myanmar crisis, which we believe something that USA really has a voice in?
Okay, as I said, it seems to me there's some degree of diplomatic downgrade. Washington's eyes sees ASEAN as increasingly seen as having unclear benefits. The U.S. is very concerned over creating a new world order, and ASEAN doesn't seem to be supportive of the idea that the U.S. have launched. If you remember, ASEAN itself has been tied to different forces in this world. In the geopolitical shift and the geoeconomic shift, we can see Myanmar with Russia and Myanmar with China, Cambodia with China, Laos with China, and everybody seems to be doing their own thing. Like the Philippines, clearly trying to do what it seems to be important for its national security. And ASEAN is not doing much over what happens in South China Sea and Philippines' national interests. ASEAN is also not agile in resolving and managing various challenges due to increasingly strained relationship between the people and their leaders. Indonesia has shown proximity to BRICS, and BRICS is considered antithesis to various Western multilateral forums. And these things are important in terms of if Joe Biden perceives that we need to make a new world order based on American leadership, these kind of challenges seems to be not to be well accepted in terms of what the U.S. had in mind. And if you ask furthermore about the people in the National Security Council, like Jake Sullivan and all that, they are for liberal internationalism. And we are forcing our way into deliberately saying hilirisasi, or making sure that we're not exporting our critical minerals. And this has become a problem because IPEF itself wanted to add another element in IPEF, which is concerning critical minerals. And this is something that should be noted because Kamala Harris will go to Vietnam. Biden went to India and then probably to Vietnam in the future. And we seem to be left behind because we are seemingly friendly, but not to be in lockstep. First of all, we try to engage America in terms of Inflation Reduction Act by allowing Indonesia to export its cars with batteries made in factories in Sulawesi by China. And the U.S. is very strict over that, in saying that if the car has China-made batteries, it should not be exported to the U.S. So there seems to be a lot of things that have to be resolved because we are a signatory to IPEF, and IPEF is very strict over certain things like supply chain, corruption, anti-corruption, transparency, and then another element that would be added, which is critical minerals, which has become the discussion throughout the world, because what we are doing is actually impacting a lot of the economies of the alliance of the United States. I think it's very clear there's some kind of like downgrading apart from that, there's another wrinkles that suddenly appears in the JETP, Just Energy Transitional Partnership. It's not going very smoothly because, according to Indonesian leaders, it says that the concessional law is concessional part of the money of $10 billion is not concessional. It's more into profit-oriented thing. And then some of the critical element is that they're not very happy about local content because that creates problems in terms of the project of JETP, which is already faltering, and then may become a threshold to say it's very difficult to do business in Indonesia. So there are many things that are not incongruent with what the U.S. is trying to do, and therefore we feel the consequences of some of their decision into a slightly downgrading the relationship with Indonesia, because there have been and other things involved, which is the situation in Natuna with their intention of putting a spy plane there, and Indonesia said no, Poseidon. And then another thing is that Indonesia doesn't want to become part of the chip alliance. So we are not really doing a good job in terms of making sure that things are going okay with U.S.-Indonesia relations.
All right, Ibu Susi, thank you so much for your fascinating insights on what factors could be causing the U.S. to be giving the cold shoulder to Indonesia and ASEAN. But I want to talk more about who will be representing USA at the ASEAN Summit, which is Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, as we know, with all due respect to VP Harris, of course, she's been somewhat quite lacking in experience when it comes to global diplomacy circuit. So even in internal politics in the US, he's been taking more of a behind-the-scene role. So how do you think she will perform at the ASEAN Summit, Bu Susi, especially when you think about how she could represent US's best interests pertaining to the quote-unquote rivalry that is going on between US and China in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, if you're speaking in diplomatic terms, you can downgrade a relations by putting a lower level officials that are not really in tune with foreign policy, for instance. That's just a way of saying, I really don't think ASEAN matters anymore to us. You know, it's like it is a great thing to have a vice president fitting in, but still there's no congruence. I think we need to harmonize a little bit our relations with the alliance, because it can cause export problems for Indonesian goods. It can cause relationship hardship between us and major powers. And then we need to consider this, because we need to learn to compromise, not completely kowtowing, but a little bit more well-intentioned and giving some degree of goodwill, showing that we are good people, and we are going to have a better relations with countries that are more powerful and could be a balancer in the South China Sea region. But that's not happening, and the U.S. can send some lower level officials. It's a choice. If you compare that with U.S.-India relations, Biden would come. Biden would come, and Biden would try to make sure that India comes as a good friend to America, and we seem to be going in different directions. First, you sign up IPEF, and then you stop exporting things. And then suddenly you want to be part of OECD. It's like from one thing into another thing, and everything doesn't seem to be in harmony. Because if you go with OECD, the requirement is much more harsh. Not even any Southeast Asia countries would sign on. And then the IPEF that requires anti-corruption practices, transparency, or the EU's problem with deforestation is not being addressed. So I think to be in good relations with powerful countries, you need to readjust. You need to make sure that things that make sense should be met. Otherwise, we'll have problems. And then we are buffer zone, like Ukraine. It is very dangerous. I hope my government would understand this, because it seems like different sorts of foreign policy happening all at once. You have OECD, you have IPEF, you have BRICS, you have problems with exports. I don't know where we're going. Honestly, it's not understandable for me. I can't put things together that sort of like make sense, because as we are having problems with places that we export our stuff, people will lose jobs. Like Nike, for instance. Nike cannot export to Europe. Why don't you listen over deforestation? I'm not doing deforestation, but rich people are doing deforestation, right? I don't know anything about nickel, but rich people are doing something on nickel. But we get the brunt of it because the economy will slow down without harmonizing with what makes sense. I think making sense is important, and creating goodwill with other countries smoothes out our exports. And we need that to create jobs.
One final question to you.
That's my view.
Right. Thank you, Professor. Just one final question to you. The past couple of years, as U.S. has been quite progressive, or rather aggressive, with its U.S. Indo-Pacific strategies, and also here in ASEAN we have ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, and that's where we see the two things intertwine. And another progress that we take note from yesterday here in Jakarta was the signing that the member states agreed on kickstarting the negotiations on the DEFA, the Digital Economy Framework Agreement, Professor, meaning that we are making strides towards de-dollarization and using less dollars, finding common currency within the bloc. And the U.S. has also its own fiscal struggle this year, with it's almost hitting the debt ceiling and inability to pay debt. Do you think that the representatives of the U.S., in this case Vice President Kamala Harris, will have something to say about these things at the table of the summit?
Of course, they're not talking about deficit. They're not going to be talking about America's problem. They're right now are shaping what Biden wants, which is creating a new world order. And not many countries may be in line with that, but at least we still need a balance of terror, balance of power in this region, because otherwise we are overwhelmed by powerful countries. And you need some degree of peaceable solution. Otherwise, we ended up being hurt because everybody wants our critical minerals. Let's just be honest with this. This is about the search for scarce resources. And if the search of scarce resources are being hindered, they have means to disintegrate us. That is the key question. Do we want to disintegrate ourselves by having leaders who are not harmonizing quite well? I mean, if you're not powerful, you maybe want to be a little bit more diplomatic, instead of challenging and ending up being subverted, we have separatism. We have scarce resources. We have people who are not loyal to the government. We've organized extra state powerful figures that disintegrate us, in a sense, in everyday life. I think we need to learn the good ways of dealing with humanity, dealing with poverty, dealing with justice. Nothing works. You sign on to IPEF. That means non-corrupt practices, transparency, justice. Where is that all going to lie? I mean, you cannot just say hilirisasi without thinking of the consequence for the people at large. And don't go to BRICS. Don't go break relations just because you happen to disagree with what their policies are. I mean, come on, grow up. Think. If you're not powerful, just be nice. Be nice is always good. Be civil. Showing goodwill. We're not anymore a North Korean isolated nitwit, you know what I mean? Doing our own stupid stuff. Stupid. Everything is being canceled. I mean, LBP went to the US and then for the Inflation Reduction Act, and they said no. You cannot export cars to the US with Chinese batteries. I mean, you know, we cannot export Nike to Europe because Europe doesn't like deforestation. Come on, be human, be mature. Stop this silliness, okay?
We hear you, Prof. Susi. Yes.
Yeah, I think we need to be nice.
Okay.
Just nice. I mean, it doesn't matter the president is nice, but it's not nice to other countries, you know? You know what I mean? Personally, he's good, but he's not nice.
All right.
We'll take note on that.
Yes. We'll end our conversation on that note. Just be nice to each other. Prof. Susi Sudarman, thank you so much for your honest and candid opinions on our program today. We truly appreciate your time. There was Prof. Susi Sudarman, Chair of the Center for American Studies from the University of Indonesia. Thank you so much, Prof. Until next time, take care.
Thank you, Professor. And on to another report now. Ahead of the 43rd ASEAN Summit tomorrow, Jakarta is preparing shuttle bus route and trying to tackle air pollution in the capital and also at the Soekarno-Hatta International Airport.
His involvement with Asia Pacific had been
Public bus operator PT Transjakarta will provide 4 shuttle or feeder buses around the 43rd ASEAN Summit areas in Jakarta. Transjakarta spokesperson Apriyastini Bhakti Bugiansri said the shuttle bus service operates from August 30th to September 7, 2023. The fleet provided by Transjakarta consists of electric vehicles or an environmentally friendly electric buses. Apriyastini said the shuttle bus service is free of charge. The 4 routes served by Transjakarta shuttle bus include the Senayan MRT Istora Mandiri to Hotel Sultan, Senayan MRT Istora to Mandiri Ritz-Carlton Pacific Place, Sultan Hotel to Ritz-Carlton Pacific Place, and MRT Istora Mandiri to JCC Senayan. In the meantime, Chair of the Anti-Respiratory Disease Committee, Agus Dwi Susanto, said the Jakarta administration has invited all governmental institutions and private companies to impose work-from-home scheme during the ASEAN Summit as an effort to reduce air pollution during the conference. He also encouraged community members to continue using public transportation like Transjakarta, MRT, also LRT, to avoid potential traffic during the 4-day ASEAN Summit. Immigration Office at the Soekarno-Hatta Airport applies work-from-home scheme to support the preparation of the ASEAN Summit and improve air quality in Jakarta. Head of Immigration Office at Soekarno-Hatta Airport, Tito Andrianto, said work-from-home scheme has been applied for employees in administration, information technology and communication, as well as intelligence and immigration enforcement units. Tito added the ASEAN summit will be closely related to traffic condition and air quality in Jakarta, which is currently a primary concern of the residents.
From transportation issues, we now move on to security issues. Indonesian National Police and military forces prepared security strategies for state guests during the 43rd ASEAN Summit held here in Jakarta from September 5th to 7th, 2023. And here are the security measures that will be implemented during the event.
Well, after successfully hosting the G20 summit in Bali in November 2022 and the 42nd ASEAN summit in Labuan Bajo, East Nusa Tenggara last May, Indonesia will again take the center stage in the 43rd ASEAN summit in Jakarta in September this year. As this year's chairman of ASEAN, Indonesia will gather world leaders at the summit to ensure world peace and stability.
The 43rd ASEAN Summit will be held in Jakarta this September and will be attended by representatives from all members of ASEAN, partner countries, and a number of international agencies such as the International Monetary Fund or IMF and the World Bank. Unlike the 42nd ASEAN Summit in Labuan Bajo, East Nusa Tenggara last May, the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta will not only be attended by leaders of ASEAN member countries, but also heads of states from partner countries. Under the hybrid working program, a half of the city administration's employees are asked to work from home. President Joko Widodo is slated to chair 12 meetings during the summit, which will be held at the Jakarta Convention Center, or JCC, Central Jakarta on September 5th to 7th, 2023, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Director General of ASEAN Cooperation, Sidarto R. Suryodipuro, told journalists during a recent press briefing. Series of meetings during the summit will be held in plenary and retreat formats, including the 26th ASEAN-China Summit, the 24th ASEAN and Republic of Korea Summit, the 26th ASEAN and Japan Summit, the 11th ASEAN-US Summit, the ASEAN-Canada Summit, the 26th ASEAN Plus 3 Summit, the 20th ASEAN-India Summit, the 3rd ASEAN-Australia Summit, the 18th East Asia Summit, and the 13th ASEAN, the United Nations Summit. The ASEAN leaders will hold an internal organization meeting on September 5th. The next day, ASEAN will hold summits with some partner countries. Meanwhile, East Asia Summit and ASEAN Plus 3 Summit will be held on September 7th. A number of bilateral meetings between ASEAN leaders will also be held on the sidelines of the 43rd ASEAN Summit. As many as 26 world leaders and heads of international organizations are expected to attend the summit, including those from East Asia Summit member countries, Pacific Island Forum or PIF member countries, Indian Ocean Rim Association or IORA member countries, and executive directors of International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. In line with the theme of Indonesia's chairmanship, ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth, the series of ASEAN Summit is expected to promote the achievement and foundation of ASEAN Vision 2045, as well as to strengthen ASEAN's institutional capacity in terms of more effective and efficient decision-making process and organizational matters. It will be the fourth time for Indonesia to assume ASEAN chairmanship, and this time, Indonesia wants to lay a foundation for future ASEAN strategic cooperation. To achieve such objectives, Indonesia will strengthen ASEAN's institutional capacity and its work mechanism, including efforts to develop ASEAN resources. Several important topics will be discussed during the summit, such as the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea, the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone, the ASEAN Maritime Outlook, food security, energy transition, and future cooperation in trade, investment, and digitalization within ASEAN, an environmentally friendly economy as a source of new economic growth. Indonesia has indicated a number of issues to be included in the recommendation of the 43rd ASEAN Summit or ASEAN Concord. Indonesia always produces an agreement or ASEAN Concord every time it serves as chairman of ASEAN. Indonesia served as chairman in 1976, 2003, and 2011. When Indonesia assumed the ASEAN chairmanship for the third time in 2011, the resulting agreement or ASEAN Concord included the establishment of the ASEAN Economic Partnership and an agreement to strengthen the ASEAN community internationally.
We now move on to side events related to the ASEAN Summit, such as the ASEAN Investment Forum, a series of activities of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, or ASEAN BAC. ASEAN member countries agree that investments is one key to make ASEAN the center of the world's economic growth. At the ASEAN Investment Forum held on Saturday in Jakarta, ASEAN member countries agreed investment plays an integral part that could help promote ASEAN to become the center of world economic growth. Indonesian Investment Minister Bahlil Lahadalia said the issues discussed at the forum was a form of continuation of concerning issues discussed at meetings in ministerial level forums in Semarang. Among the issues brought to light was particularly regarding how to build an inclusive investment collaboration with foreign direct investment, or FDI, in ASEAN. According to Minister Bahlil, investment is not yet seen equal and that ASEAN is trying to formulate various kinds of policy directions, one of which is giving each country the freedom to formulate what will be used as based on comparative advantages of each country.
Meanwhile, on the first day of the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit 2023 on Sunday, West Australian Premier Roger Cook said West Australia sees huge engagement with ASEAN.
With that, I'll let you the floor to you, sir.
While attending the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit 2023 on Sunday, West Australian Premier Roger Cook explained that Western Australia has a huge engagement with ASEAN, especially in enhancing ASEAN economic development.
Between Western Australia and ASEAN. So whether that is around critical minerals, exploring the opportunities that battery energy provides, or around renewable energy such as hydrogen and other forms of renewable energy. Western Australia has an abundance of critical minerals. We have an abundance of solar, wind and land. So we want to be a renewable powerhouse to decarbonise our economy, but we want to also make sure that we can provide an opportunity to decarbonise the economy of our Southeast Asian partners as well. We've got a particularly strong emphasis around international education and the role that it can play to build those people-to-people ties. I've also brought my Minister for Primary Industries because we think agricultural products and agri-foods provides a very important opportunity between our two economies to build those economic ties.
Contributions and partnership with other countries is expected to help ASEAN in achieving its investment target.
ASEAN 2023 is Asha Rashid. The alternate chair.
And that concludes today's Journal of the 43rd ASEAN Summit and its related summits in Jakarta. I'm Rahmat Idris.
And I'm Siska Becker. Do stay tuned to TVRI World for our ongoing coverage of the 43rd ASEAN Summit. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Bye-bye.